It's been a long time since I've sent a track out to be mastered. Why? Because I master my songs before I even start mixing them. It's a technique called top-down mixing. I'm going to show you what this technique is all about, and I'm going to give you the exact same template that I use to master my mixes. This happens to be the identical plugin chain that I use to master all the example songs for my drum plugin. Here's a quick before and after. So you can see how you can definitely use this template to master something you've already mixed. But let's talk about how I like to approach a mix using that top-down mixing technique. It's really very simple. Before I even do one thing on my mix, I load up a preset on my master bus. This does a couple things. One, all these little pieces of processing add up to subtly sweeten and control your mix. So you're able to get away with a lot less heavy lifting, EQ, compression, effects on each individual track because they're all being processed as one giant group. The other benefit of this process is that you're always listening to and shooting for the exact finished product that you're gonna have. You're not taking the mix up to a certain point, bringing it into another process and completely changing it. While some mixers value this process, handing a mix off to someone else for mastering, or even having another step where they master it themselves, I really value the fact that every tweak I make in the mix is directly reflected in the exact finished mastered version of this song that I'm going to put out. Like I said, different strokes for different folks. This process works really well for me for all the hundreds of live recordings that I mix every year. For my money on these projects, an additional mastering step is just not necessary. That said, mixing using this process can still be advantageous even if you plan to get your mix mastered elsewhere. Pretty much as a rule, any mix, when you send it off to mastering, it's going to hit some limiting and it's going to change in dynamics. It's going to sometimes drastically. So it can be really good to have this mastering chain going. Even if you don't use it all the time, you can flip it on and off and get an idea of how your mix is eventually going to sound when you do have it mastered. And this can really help to inform a lot of your mixing decisions. So anyway, let's take a look at what all is going on in this mastering chain. First thing we have is a gain plugin. This is just utilitarian. You can increase the level going into this whole chain of plugins, or you can back it off if it's very high. There's been a lot of debate about gain staging over the past few years. I am a fan of gain staging. Apparently, it's completely unnecessary in a modern DAW. However, if you are hitting something like a compressor, you're going to want to feed that compressor a certain amount of signal. This gain plugin allows you to raise or lower that amount of signal as a whole rather than going into each individual plugin and making adjustments. So if you want to call that gain staging, I think it remains a useful thing, even though it's technically not necessary to prevent clipping or distortion in modern DAWs and modern plugins. After the gain plugin is a simple overdrive plugin. This could be anything. I just use this overdrive plugin stock in Logic because I wanted to keep this whole plugin chain all stock Logic plugins. This just gives some harmonic distortion, some grit, some warmth to the track. This stage kind of emulates the master circuit in an old console. You're hitting some transformers, you're hitting some different things that color the sound and glue it together. After that is a very utilitarian EQ. The template that I have has a dip right around the mud zone here. Don't quote me on the frequency. I'm not someone who really knows frequencies. I just take the thing and move it around until it sounds good. On this particular track, I put another cut in the low mids because there was some unpleasant resonances, let's say, in the drums. You can hear it right here. That that cleaned it up. So that brings me to another point on using this template. The settings that are built in aren't going to work on every mix. They work on a lot of mixes. Just go in and tweak them to fit your song, especially this mud cut. I usually just play the song and then just move this around until it starts to sound clean to me. Hey, quick question. Do you like gatekeepers? Yeah, me neither. So if you're getting something out of this content, don't gatekeep it. Do me a huge favor and hit that like button. That tells YouTube to show it to more and more people. Maybe together we can spread this crazy idea that music, recording, mixing, and mastering isn't brain surgery, and anyone can learn to do a great job on it, and you don't need to buy a bunch of expensive stuff to sound pro. Anyway, let's get back to it. Next up, we have two compressors. This is just this classic combination of a Focusrite compressor and an SSL style compressor. They're actually hitting pretty hard in this mix. I think generally these are just supposed to be barely tapping away. But, you know, if it works, it works. This is kind of a raucous live mix, so it works. After that, we have a multi-band compressor. I just pulled it up to control the entire mix through the whole frequency range. I find having a subtle multi-band compressor is really nice on the master bus. After that is an EQ for color. This is, I believe, Logic's Pultec style EQ, and I just did the very typical high-end sweetening, boost, and attenuation. Also, it looks like I might have added a little bit of drive here. This is for a little more of that analog color. Here's with it off. On. Alright, so that's really subtle. I can't even really hear it. Maybe if I threw my headphones on, I'd be able to hear it better. But that just goes to show that every element in this signal chain, even though it looks like a lot of stuff, it's just doing a little bit of work, and it all adds up to make a fairly transparent improvement on the mix. Last in the processing, we have a limiter, and this is just the Logic stock limiter. I've got it set to an output level of -1. I will say that you could put a more high performance limiter like FabFilter. Pro-L will push it definitely farther with less distortion, less pumping, more transparent limiting. So that could definitely be an upgrade. But as you can hear, you know, you can definitely get away with this Logic stock limiter as the last element in your signal chain. So after that, we have a multimeter plugin, and this is just where we can keep an eye on our final levels. I'm not really a big stickler on the levels that you're getting out of this thing. In general, I just compare to reference tracks right off Spotify, and I make sure mine are in the ballpark of those reference tracks. This plugin will also tell you if your left and right channels are way out of whack. There's this little correlation meter down there, and if that's peaking nice and far to the right, that means your left and right levels are pretty well balanced. You don't have a huge discrepancy one way or another. So that's about it. If you've never tried top-down mixing, you should definitely give it a try. And if you already use Robot Dog drums in Logic Pro, it's kind of a no-brainer. I developed all the presets running through this mastering chain, so it's kind of like a 1-2 punch to getting a completely mixed and mastered finished drum sound right out of the box. Anyway, I'll leave the link to the mastering template in the description below. If you'd like me to make a template like this for other DAWs, let me know what you use. I could probably make one for Cubase, Pro Tools, Reaper, I don't know, you tell me. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to really keep on cranking out content this year. I've got a new studio. I plan to do more mixing related tutorials like this, so be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers!